everyone. Hello and welcome to Renegade Con's ongoing interview series. Today, I'm your host, Chris Whippen. I am joined by Mr. Randy Hoyt of, now, Foxtrot Games? Is that how I want to say this? Because I don't think I can get the pronunciation right on that.
Yes, that is right. Foxtrot Games.
Thank you for making it easy, because there are a lot of people who don't. But I always like to ask where the names come from. So where did Foxtrot come from? Are you a fan of dancing in the 20s, or like where's this from?
No, but it is related to the dance for sure, and to foxes, the animal. I love foxes, and they have a nice connotation for games because foxes are really clever. I imagine they would be really good at strategy board games.
I like it.
When you look at the foxtrot as a dance, it's a very accessible dance. It's easy to pick up, and it's something people are still dancing 100 years later. And that's the kind of games we wanted to make, games that are easy to pick up, fun to play, and stuff that will last, not just something that you'll play once or twice, but games that you'll play for 100 years maybe.
Awesome. Now, do you personally dance the Foxtrot, or is that just a parallel?
Just a parallel.
Okay.
I'm not a very good dancer.
Well, when you have a themed dance like that, that's kind of like a waltz or something, I think I can even find rhythm in a waltz. So there's
Nice.
hope for us all.
Nice. And the main dance step in the foxtrot, you move like a chess piece, like a knight, 2 steps forward, 1 step to the side. So it has a nice connection to games.
My goodness. Well, you did not expect to have a complete conversation about dance steps and 2/3 time, 3/4 time, and whatever else would be associated with that. So we could talk about some games. So
Okay.
I did a little research, and I had a feeling that I'm like, I thought that Lanterns was one of the first games that Renegade actually put out. And, I think we sometimes forget that there can be design studios, individuals, designers, and things that are all behind games. And it turns out that Foxtrot actually made Lanterns and then Renegade distributed. Is that correct?
Yeah, we describe it as co-publishing, the
Okay.
relationships. So all the things that a publisher usually does, which is find games, develop them, hire artists,
Mm-hmm.
do all the package design, and then sell the games in distribution. All those responsibilities we split with Renegade. So we emphasize the beginning parts, the signing the games, licensing them, doing the development, playtesting, and artwork. And then we partner with Renegade, and they are the other half of that co-publishing, handling logistics, distribution, freight, sales and marketing, and all that kind of stuff.
Does it help to have it wasn't then, because literally Renegade Scott had just started it up. I mean, quite the pedigree coming in, no doubt, but
Yeah.
he just kind of started it up. How much does that help you get a game to market?
Oh, it's huge for me. I guess I still am a small publisher. This Lanterns was our second Kickstarter that we had run. We had 1,200 backers, I think, if I remember right. That was in the fall of 2014.
Guilty.
And so when Scott reached out to me, he saw the game on Kickstarter, the story goes, and thought, man, why didn't I find that game to publish it? So he reached out to me. We met at BGG-Con and played the game and talked about co-publishing it together. So he has a huge network, even back then, of distributor contacts and retailer contacts, and was able to help us get the game into a wider market, and without us having to spend that time, so we could get started on our next game right away, while he and his team were handling that distribution side, getting the game where I couldn't have gotten it, and just spending time, convention prep. I mean, it debuted at Origins, and I wasn't even there, and it had a huge booth, a huge presence, sold out there at Origins in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as a small publisher I have another full-time job, so this is just a side hobby, nights and weekends job. It lets me make more games, lets the games that I do make sell more, without me having to hire a full-time staff or doing all those things.
Right. So let's dwell on Lanterns for a few minutes, because I think it's such an interesting product that kind of like launched your line, because in one hand, you're not doing a ton that's new, right? We're just doing tile placement. I mean, we're just building a network. We're trying to match colors and things. But it was still very revolutionary, because you actually, based on where you sat, you got different things. And that was one of the first games I ever encountered that did something like that.
Yeah.
Did that come out, like, was that part of the initial design, or did that come out during the development phase?
Oh yeah, that was the core of the game. And when I first, so Christopher Chung pitched it to me. When I read the rules and I read that, I thought, oh, this is going to be cool. He developed it or designed it during a game jam, and the prompt was it was a video game jam and some tabletop games designers all there, and the prompt was perspective, and so everyone was making games that like played with the perspective that you had, or how, kind of the art style of perspective and how that mattered. And Chris was inspired by that. What if your perspective on the board then influenced something about the game? In this case, which resources you earn with each play.
It's really great. I mean, because it's one of those things that when you look at it, it's very easy to teach because everybody understands placing tiles down, and if I match things, I get better results. Like, I think that kind of clicks, but then to be able to understand the positioning is such an easy step. And I still see it getting played, and I still play it to this day.
Yeah, it's great to see it still being played at conventions or at game stores, and people still talk about it. Yeah, I mean, and the other thing that's really nice about it is that perspective is tied into that everybody gets something on everybody else's turn. And
right.
That definitely gives it a nice kind of relaxing vibe, a sense of abundance, that there's plenty of things. Everybody's getting something all the time. And I think that's helped with the vibe quite a bit. And I mean, that's the hook when I teach the game. That's the moment people's light bulbs go off, and they're like, "Oh, I see." It's like, "Hey, I play this tile, I get this, but so does everybody else. Everybody else is going to get something based on what I did." So, it's friendly in that I'm doing things and benefiting other players, but you're trying to optimize, not to give other people too many good things or the perfect thing, and try to save the best stuff for yourself.
So, it kind of leads me into the next question, which is, are good quality components a key part of making a game that kind of has that staying power and that table feel? Because again, it's very simple. It's not a lot of bits, but they are good quality. How do you feel that played into that?
Yeah, as a small publisher, so our very first game, we went a little bit overboard and have, all these custom meeples. It's a jungle adventure game. There's custom panthers and snake meeples and monkeys and all that. And we had these really cool tray racks for holding tokens. You have a backpack that has limited capacity, so you can hold these tokens in like kind of a card rack for tokens. But as a small publisher, those really nice components can be too expensive for the game, especially if you're printing in small quantities, which we were on the very first game. So for the second game, we really wanted to focus on great artwork that has sort of a one-time cost. You pay for it, but you can print in a small run, and then if you do well, you can reprint, and you're not spending a ton of money on those same fancy components.
Sure.
And so the components, at least in the original design, were pretty basic: cards and tiles. We did have a stretch goal to add wood tokens, which I was really happy with. So they're screen printed with the Emperor's seal on these wood tokens. And we couldn't have afforded to do those without the Kickstarter stretch goals. And then they still raised the price of the MSRP. If you watch some reviews, there's one unboxing I love where a woman is unboxing everything and she gets to those tokens and she just like forgets that she's making an unboxing video, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, these are so amazing!" And I love that one because they are a bit more premium, and I do think that the components factor into your experience.
Sure.
As a small publisher, we haven't pushed the boundaries a lot on the types of components. Our latest game, we did finally try doing miniatures, and they turned out really nicely. I'm really happy with them. But most of our games have been cards and tokens, and we've really focused on art to try to make those draw you into the experience and immerse you in that experience in a way that fits a small publisher budget.
Interesting. So you kind of went on from there, and we've done, you followed that up with Lanterns Dice. I mean, you already had the positional thing, and you were able to just build on that. Was that something that seemed very natural, or was it just kind of a response to the roll and write movement of the 19s?
Yeah, of the 19s. Yeah, so we had Bryan reached out to us about, he'd been working on a number of roll and writes and wanted to talk to us about a Lanterns themed roll and write. The real challenge was we wanted it to feel like a good roll and write, and like it was related to lanterns, not just to slap the Lanterns brand on a roll and write. So we actually worked with Chris on 3 different versions before we landed where we did. And the thing that was missing, the main thing that was missing in the first 2 was the positional aspect. We had a hard time figuring out how to get the positional aspect. So one version had just dice drafting. You'd roll a bunch of dice and everybody would draft. And it was too slow, and it didn't feel at all like Lanterns, because while you get stuff on other people's turns, it's not your decision to get what you get. And so we wanted to find a way. At one point, the person would roll and hand out all the dice, and that, again, it slowed it down, and it's not like you don't have that much control in Lanterns. So, working with Bryan back and forth, we stumbled on this idea. At one point, we had this huge die that just had Lanterns tiles on all 6 sides. And then we were like, oh, wait, we could take it just has 4 sides. Each tile has 4 sides. If we rolled 4 dice and got them sort of locked into a tile shape. So we think about that, the dice in the dice tray, as you're randomly generating a Lanterns tile with 4 different colors in each corner. So it wasn't easy, but we knew that we didn't want to just make a roll and write that had Lanterns on it. We wanted to figure out a way to make it feel like Lanterns and also feel, like a roll and write.
So we shouldn't expect like Fox in the Forest roll and write anytime soon. And I think I might thank you for that.
We're not working on that at the moment. If somebody has an idea for that, though, we're open to looking at it.
It's funny how like a tile placement game you think would naturally lend itself, but I think you're right. I think a lot of games can really lose their identity in that process, and having the hopper that kind of holds the dice and then locks them in the tray is just a great solution. And if you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to check out a video, because it's one of those that, yes, it's custom dice and all, but I think it kind of gives you that extra level and speeds things along, which is definitely a Lanterns trait. I mean, you turn around and you're at max limit on cards. I can't tell you how many times that happens.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the tray was fun, and that was really, I think, our first big experimental component. We didn't know how it would work, so we were talking with the factory about, the thickness of the plastic. We wanted it to hold up. We didn't want it to break in shipping, but it needed to be strong enough and to try to keep the dice from bouncing out. So we had different prototypes where the dice would bounce out more than they did in the final version. So, and the dice too were a tough challenge. I mean, it's a little more straightforward, the silkscreen printing on the dice. But yeah, that project, as small of a game as it is, it was a real big step for us in the kinds of components we were experimenting with.
Right, because it's not just a simple, here, cut some cards, here's a template for cardboard, here's the die line, let's go, right?
Exactly.
So it's a little more involved than that. Excellent. Yeah. So the other thing you did is you kind of said, let's kind of revisit trick taking a little bit with the Fox in the Forest, and then the follow-up to that with DUET. What made you say that there's room enough for yet another trick taking game in the world? What made you want to bring this one out specifically?
Yeah, I mean, some of that was being naive, I think, because as a small publisher, and this is not my full-time job, so I have steady income through my day job. So I'm not as worried sometimes about how profitable the games will be. I can spend time with them and see, is this a game that I love? Is this a game that I think it should exist? And at the time, 2-player only games and trick-taking games, I was like, is this going to be a mistake? Is this going to be the kind of game that there's just no market for? Luckily, before that, we had started to see some 2-player games coming out. Seven Wonders Duel, Patchwork, those were some of the early ones that made me comfortable with giving it a try. But I just loved the game so much. I mean, when Josh pitched it to me, we played it and just had so much fun playing it. And originally it had a few more layers than just the trick-taking game. We worked with Josh to sort of streamline it, smooth it out, and we thought, there are a lot of trick-taking games out there, and many new trick-taking games try to add some new layer onto trick-taking. But we decided that two-player only trick-taking was enough of a market interest that we didn't need some of the extra things that had been layered on. And so, I love playing cards. I love the feel of classic playing cards, and really wanted to find a way to sort of introduce people who are into modern gaming sort of back into that. Like, what would a modern trick-taking game feel like? And so the card powers come into play, the scoring, the sort of nuance for scoring table there. But just the fact that it was two-player only, we were convinced that it was worth trying to put out a game that was just trick-taking, just two-player.
Well, I think it worked because there aren't that many. You're right, absolutely. And then, we're coming in on the end of, all the lockdowns, people getting stuck at home, which I tell you what, these games are saving a lot of sanity out there right
Yes.
now. Have you seen any kind of surge or, sales kind of or feedback from having a two-player game like that available for people like during that time?
I haven't seen the numbers I get are on more of a delay, so I'm not quite sure, the time frame based on the current pandemic situation. But definitely, get that feedback a lot that, people are now playing games more just with two players than they used to in their life. So it's something I play a lot with just my wife. So we play a lot of two-player games, and I know there are people out there who want them, and I'm glad to see that the market is responding. The market does want games that are for two-player only.
Right. Cool. So what to the layperson who might not understand, they might think that, well, DUET is two. How does that play into,
Yes.
the other one's two? So what's the difference for them?
Well, they're competitive and cooperative. So the first game, Fox in the Forest, is competitive. We jokingly call it Duel sometimes. Not Seven Wonders. It's Fox in the Forest Duel. Just joking, though. There are no plans to rebrand it.
Please no.
And we started looking at, we did get a lot of feedback that people like the game, but it is a little too cutthroat when they want to play with a significant other and so it occurred to us, hey, if people are buying this to play with somebody, a significant other, they might like to work together as well. So sometimes play competitively and sometimes play cooperatively. And I love cooperative games. Most of the games I play regularly, I think, are cooperative. So we thought, what would a cooperative two-player trick-taking game look like? We took a step back and we thought, there's no way that'll work. But people said two-player trick-taking wouldn't work. So we thought, what would that look like? And we stumbled on the idea of, there are a lot of trick-taking games where you play in partnerships. So spades, bridge, you have a teammate.
Right.
And so we thought, well, let's try to capture that feeling that I'm working with my teammate, but just without any opponents. And so that was really the big emphasis on the design and development there. It's funny because there are a number of cooperative games coming out now where you can't talk, like think of the Mind or the Game of these, Hanabi. The game is in the fact that you can't talk. And in trick taking, when you have a teammate, you can't talk usually, but that's just because you don't want your opponents to overhear. If you get rid of the opponents, you still can't tell what's in your hand, and it has that feel. So it fits in the sort of this modern movement of cooperative games where the game is in the communication restriction. And so it fit nicely, I think, into the modern sense of those kinds of cooperative games with limited communication, and still captures that classic trick-taking feel.
Cool. So I guess that brings us up to the search for Planet X. And you kind of decided, small box games are passé now. We want to have a Ticket to Ride size box, and we want to have a big box on the shelf. So what kind of brought you to Planet X? Because now we're going from tiling to trick taking. Now we're on to deduction. I don't know that I can't draw lines that way. So what made you decide that was it?
Nice. Well, one of the very first people I met at Designers when I was looking for games was Ben Rossett. And he had a game that we tried to work on for a little bit and decided it just didn't make sense to move forward with it. But we spent a bunch of time together working on that. And he came to Board Game Geek Con. I live here in Dallas where Board Game Geek Con is. So he came and stayed with us for a few days, and he taught me Alchemists. And I love Alchemists. It's very big and very long and very hard to teach. And just about every time I play, somebody makes a mistake in their logic. And
which you think the app would fix that problem, so you don't have that problem, but it still happens.
So, but he loved that game, and he taught it to me, and I love that game. And so, when he had the idea to work on a new deduction game, it has a lot. People will notice the similarities between Search for Index and Alchemist, but it's a much lighter game, much shorter game. The logic is more of the focus. There's not the kind of worker placement and some of the other elements you have in Alchemists. And he pitched it to us. We had been talking about some other things. It's just we've kept in touch over the years, and he showed it to us. We played it, and we loved it immediately. We made him an offer right there. We often joke that doesn't happen, that publishers don't make offers on the spot. And then we were like, oh, I guess we're going to do that now. So told him that day we wanted to publish it, and he had a few other pitches. So there was some cycles there before we signed it. But I just love the game. I love logic puzzles. I'm the kid who over summer vacation did those logic puzzles, like, the girl who lives in the red house is across the street from the boy with the poodle or whatever it is. Logic puzzles, and you try to figure out where everybody
goes to school on Wednesday, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So we played it and loved it. So wanted to make it, and it is a little bit bigger than most of our other games. It has a board. This is our first game with an actual board in it, which is kind of exciting.
So that's where having a partner who has produced many boards and things like that is definitely going to come in and help out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this one's a little weird. We cut a hole in the board. So we weren't sure if that would work or not, but early on. So on the board, the Earth orbits the sun as the game progresses, and we needed a way to do that. So, we looked at a number of fancy plastic pieces, something like Zulkin, and decided the easiest way to do it would be there's a hole in the board where you put a wood disc that represents the sun, and then there's a piece of cardboard that goes over that rotates, and the Earth is printed on that board that orbits the sun.
The Sulkin gears are nice, but I imagine when they went to make that must have been a production nightmare at the same time, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah. There's a lot of back and forth. You make these molds, and when you've got pieces that have to interlock and interact with cardboard components, I haven't even broached that. So we had some prototypes that we made. We work with Print Play Games for a lot of our prototype stuff, so they were able to prototype this for us, cut a hole in the board, put a disc, and then a punch board sheet, and see if it would all work. And the factory does their white box samples, so we got that and made a few adjustments after a couple of those boards. With the cardboard and the cards, you don't even necessarily have to see a physical prototype from the factory, because you know what cards do, and you know what tiles do, and those kinds of things. So
sure.
This one we had the tray from Lantern's Dice, and then the board here. We did have a bunch of back and forth, getting multiple samples made and sent to the house. So it's a lot of fun, and I'm really happy with the final components in both of those games. But they do take some extra work prototyping with the factory.
So the thing that always messes with me is that a game board is a lot thicker than your general punch boards and things like that. Was that part of that, trying to have to figure out exactly how to get that so things lined up and were consistent?
Yeah, the punch board sits on top, but yeah, the biggest calculation there is the wood disc has to sit on your table and then go through the board and through the punch board. And we didn't want a giant wood disc, but we wanted it big enough that if you were rotating it quickly, it wouldn't fly off.
Fair enough.
And even this is very nuanced, but when they punch a punch board, the die comes down and the top corners are a little more round from where it punches through the board than the bottom. And so on ours, we ended up printing the Earth on the back of the punch board because the corners are flat there. And then the part that's face down has the rounded corner, so that as it goes around, it doesn't clip the paper on the board. When we were working with the white box sample, it would, when it was the other way, it would clip the paper on the board where the board was cut, because it's, there's one cut in the board and then it folds everywhere else. And we were like, oh no, this isn't going to work. It's going to tear the paper. But when we flipped it upside down, because the corners are more round, it glides over that much more seamlessly. So we did that a couple of times with this one, worried about which side of the punch board had the die cut on it.
Now, the other thing I have is lanterns, just to circle back around, as we kind of closed the loop a little bit, was one of also the first games in a big box store, if I'm not mistaken. It was one of the ones that like hit Barnes & Noble, and then I believe it even hit Target.
Yeah, so I mean, Lanterns was definitely our first game in Barnes & Noble, and it was early on when Barnes & Noble was picking up up games. Yeah.
Did you find, well, was it cool to like be able just to go into like a generic store that like, anybody can walk in, not just, people who go to game stores. Was that pretty cool and different?
Yeah. Yeah, that was very cool. And they featured it at they were trying out for, I don't know how long they ran these, but game night at the store. So they would have people come in and they would demo the games and people could play them. And you could win prizes and different things. So I went to my local Barnes & Noble for that. And
okay.
I mean, it was really cool to just see that, Again, Renegades handled a lot of the contract negotiations and all of that side of it. So I know working with big box stores is a different animal than working with game stores through that whole distribution process. But from just as a design studio side of things, it was really great to just see it. And people would tell me all the time, send me pictures. Hey, I see your game in Barnes & Noble and all that.
Is that you? Is that you?
I think it helps a lot, even with people who already know about games and are just, they go look in Barnes & Noble to see what Barnes & Noble is selling. And so I think that helped raise awareness of the game, even among people who typically shop at their friendly local game store, even there. But yeah, definitely reaching a new audience of people. It was pretty cool. It's just our second game that we had ever put out, but to have it reach such a wide distribution was pretty cool.
Right. I vividly remember, because my friends and I, like, right when this would start, like, we would go out to dinner on Friday nights, and then we'd go into Barnes & Noble because they had the Starbucks, and then, some of us would sit there and play games because I would bring stuff in, and then, some of us would just have coffee and read, and it was just one of those things. Like, that was kind of my Friday night game store for a good solid year. So I totally get it. And I think that it's got to be really cool to see that. Like, I think that, because I don't know, I don't want to say that there's social acceptance that comes along with that, but there's something to say, like, my games in stores that, my siblings can go in, my friends can go in and just see it there and be like, oh, I know that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. People can relate to that. People who don't go to friendly local game stores can understand what that means. Whenever I tell people that I make games, they ask, well, where do they sell your games? And when I can say they sell them at Barnes & Noble, they get what that means.
Right. They're approachable. They might require a little bit more work, but they're cool.
Yes.
So do you have anything cool on the horizons? I mean, we got Planet X is just on the verge of coming out. We have demos going on of it now. Do you have anything in the hopper that's interesting and coming that you can talk about yet? Or
nothing that we can talk about. Nothing we can talk about yet, but the Search for Planet X is the big thing. Yeah, we're running demos here at the con, and starting pre-orders, I think, any day now. So we've been delivering rewards to backers and seeing the feedback there from backers. So it's been just so great to see people just loving the game. It's always great when you get a new game in and people love it. So that's been really fun. And so that's the big thing we're pushing right now. And that should be available in stores soon.
So the last thing I have to ask is, what would you say to somebody who is kind of, Randy from 2014, who wants to make games, put them out and publish them? What kind of advice could you give to somebody starting out?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest recommendation is start with a smaller game. There's a lot that goes into this process if you're publishing, and we made some mistakes with our first game, even beyond the fact that it is way too expensive for a small publisher to make. But there are a lot of mistakes that we made there and have learned from, and scaled back. Our Lanterns was definitely sort of a smaller game, but it is going to take a lot of work. It's a lot more work to publish and distribute a game than I would have thought. You think, oh, I'm going to make games; it'll be fun. But find a group of people that you can play test with that will give you honest feedback. You can never play test a game enough. Start small if you can. I mean, if you're super excited about a big game, you should probably start with something you're really excited about. But your first game you make is probably not going to be your best, so don't waste all your great ideas on building this huge epic game for your first one. Get some experience, start with a small game, and just start getting to know people. Meet people in the industry. If you can go to conventions or volunteer at your local game store or all those kinds of things, because there's a lot of knowledge in this industry, and it's a very friendly and easy to approach industry. But you got to get out there and just meet some people and start to learn things. Join Facebook groups or Twitter discussions that happen around making games, and just always have fun. If you're not having fun, there's definitely times where it's a lot of work. We mailed out. This is the first time we've mailed out our backer awards because of the pandemic. Our usual fulfillment companies weren't always available to help, so we shipped in 700 games into our front living room and shipped them out over a week and a half. There are times where there are less fun than others, but making games should be fun. You're bringing fun into the world, and you can do that best when you are having fun doing it as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Randy. I've really enjoyed getting to know some more about the company and how it works and what you do. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we're going to let you go so that you can get back to doing what you want to do and have some fun and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you at home for watching. We hope you enjoy the rest of the con. And be sure to check out Planet X. If anything, if you can get a demo, get one in. If not, we'll have plenty of videos linked to it and everything else. So you can check it out there. Awesome. Great. Thanks, Randy. Have a good afternoon, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.